Good morning, everybody. Keith Engle here with TGI Sports Talks one-on-one with Keith Engle. A scheduled guest this morning is Brian Holloway, who's not yet arrived in the studio. Hopefully he will. I had some confirmation yesterday that we were good to go, so I hope Brian makes it in here this morning. If not, we will struggle on as best we can. Brian, former outstanding second-team All-Pro, Pro Bowl player with the Patriots from 81 through, 86, I think, and then a couple of years with the Raiders before he left football for other endeavors. Did some motivational speaking. Maybe he still does. I want to kind of ask him about that. Hopefully, Brian will be here. And I want to welcome everybody watching us on Facebook, TGI Sports Talks Facebook page, YouTube page, X page, even live on Roku on National Streaming Sports channel. And guys, get there and download that channel. You may have to find it still under Northeast Streaming Sports, but it is. They have changed their name to National Streaming Sports. We're also live on their YouTube feed and Let's Talk Sports YouTube feed as well. Lots of great content on those pages, guys. So do that. Thumbs up, DDH. We're always thinking of you. And quick shout out to Ralph Williams at RW Media. Ralph does some great stuff in Pittsburgh, not just Pittsburgh related, but national coverage, especially the sports corner that he does with Smoke and Jim Frazier every Tuesday from 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern on WBVP radio. And I'll be on, and I try to share the shows when Ralph makes them in a shareable format. And I'll be a guest on that show at 4:30 on Tuesday, next Tuesday, whatever that is, the 14th, I think. What else? Shout out to my guest from last week, Buddy Biancalana. Great time talking to Buddy. Great reaction. We've had some great guests. And as we wait for to see if our guest this morning shows, Mr. Brian Holloway, I'm starting to get concerned, if you will. Actually, let me send him a quick message. I want to thank all the guests we've had so far. Our first guest, of course, was Marty Cordova. We went very well. Tim Worley was a tremendous guest. The views were off the charts for Tim Worley. Georgia fans, great job. Pittsburgh fans, great job. As the views were great for all of these interviews. And, of course, last week with Buddy Biancalana. Coming up, we're confirmed with Billy Martin Jr. next week. We'll talk about Billy growing up as the son of a personality like Billy's, who was, mercurial, to say the least. I don't know what that was like and his recollections of Billy and Billy's relationship with different guys. And look, Billy was a great manager. He got in his own way sometimes. We'll have Kevin Mensch, former Texas Ranger and Milwaukee Brewer on the 24th. A couple other teams too, and we'll talk about all of that. The 31st is open right now, but I'm talking to Harvey Williams, former Kansas City and Raider running back. We hope to have him on the 31st. We got Randy Lurch, former Philadelphia Philly, Milwaukee Brewer, Expo. He'll be on. Great potential. This is a great, and a lot of the guys we have on are great stories, life lessons. He'll be on the 7th of June, and then on the 14th, we've got Paul Rosen, who's a para-athlete. Hockey, I think, is his main sport, but he's played volleyball and tragic accident when he was younger and still became, a sports star in the para-athlete world. So we'll talk to him about that and some of the other things he's accomplished in his life. And then we're talking with many others. We'll be filling out the schedule for June and July as we go forward here as well. Let's see who's with us quickly. Maybe it's Brian Holloway. Good morning, Ralph. There's Ralph Williams at RW Media. Good to have you with us. Every show you get my shout out, my friend. Every show. Look forward to being on with you on Tuesday at 4:30 Eastern time. And then we'll share that episode as well. Ralph, anytime if you do me a favor, if you're still with me, tag TGI Sports Talk and see if it comes up with a tag so that I can click on it and I can share it. It's a lot easier, and it's a direct share from your feed. If I share it from the messenger, I have to do it through a link and whatnot, and I don't know if it's as clean a transfer as you will, if you will, to your video. But either way, we still get it shared when we can, and we'll certainly share my appearance next week and any of the shows that we can for Mr. Ralph Williams. Great job over there, by the way, buddy. You're the best. Excellent. So again, our guest today is supposed to be Brian Holloway. I had confirmation from him yesterday, but things happen sometimes. And when you're going live and doing these things live, sometimes things happen. And we'll talk a little bit about and see if Brian, I'm going to send Brian a quick note. He did answer me on Facebook yesterday, not any of his texts. I hope it's him that. Hold on, I got the wrong keyboard here. Bear with me, guys, and we'll talk a little New England Patriots, or I guess whatever you want. Whoops. All right. Oh, anyway, we'll continue to try to get Brian in here. I just sent him a quick note. We'll see if he responds. Brian played. Listen, he traveled around. I want to get his thoughts on a lot of things. I mean, he traveled around a lot as a kid, struggled academically, ended up at Stanford. So you overcome those academic woes when you're end up at Stanford and you're recruited by almost every Ivy League university out there. Played great under Bill Walsh, and it was a letterman in both track and football. Played with John Elway in college. Got drafted by the Patriots. Came to a team that was with Ron Meyer as a coach, which was struggling a bit. But then they had a coaching change to Coach Raymond Berry, and things clicked in '85. I think they started 2-4 that year, but then went on a big long winning streak. They ended making the wild card. Won 3 playoff games on the road. I believe they beat the Jets, the Raiders, and the Dolphins to get to the Super Bowl. We're on a roll, man. Big underdogs. That was a year though that the Bears were just phenomenal that year. 15-1. Only loss was to the Dolphin team that the Patriots beat for the AFC Championship. All I can say about the Super Bowl is we were ahead 3-0. And when I say we, by the way, I'm a big Patriot fan, lifelong Patriot fan. Had season tickets, have bought, I don't know, tens of thousands of dollars in wearable. I think I can say we. I think I'm emotionally and financially invested enough to say we. Anyway, some big losses. They get back to the playoffs the next year, and they lose in the first round in Denver. Close game. A lot of controversy going on around the team, though, because the Sullivans were financially strapped. And again, we're waiting to see if Brian Williams will pop in here this morning. I saw him active, so I sent him a message. There's Kay Mercer responding to a happy birthday. We hope to have Kay Mercer on here at some point, too, to talk about her late husband. Bobby was one of my heroes. But back to the Patriots. They were struggling. The Sullivans really didn't have the money to continue to compete, especially after Pat Sullivan sponsored the Jackson family's, I don't know can't remember what they called the tour, but it just put the team in total distress. So they ended up having to sell the team to Victor Kayam, who had no money either. Stadium situation was awful. So, good morning, Steve. How are you? We're just waiting to see if we get our guest in here this morning, Mr. Brian Holloway. And I'm a little concerned that we're not going to, as I have not got a response here. He was active 5 minutes ago, but these things happen. Hope Brian's is doing okay. Let me text him and try it that way too. Anyway, this was a great football team. Ray Barry ends up getting fired for, and they replace him with God, I can't remember the coach's name. Isn't that awful? Rod Rust, and they go 1-15. They had a couple. Listen, they were 8-8. They had struggles too. There was other controversies, right? Tony Eason was the number 1 draft pick. I want to talk to Brian about what the team thought about Tony Eason and whether there was a divided locker room because some guys wanted Grogan, some guys wanted Eason. I was a big Tony Eason fan. I thought he could have been. He was missing something. I'd love to find out what it is. Then Doug Flutie comes in there in 87-ish. And that really causes another huge controversy, right? Because Flutie, a big star at Boston College, and it just created another whole mess. Eason ends up getting released, plays with the Jets. Flutie stinks at the time, goes to the Canadian Football League. It's a huge mess. And Brian goes from there. Brian goes from there to Oakland, L.A. actually, and I think they moved back to Oakland. Maybe I think the first year he was there, they were in L.A., and the second year they went back to Oakland. You remember there was a contentious case in the late 70s, early 80s. I guess it was late 70s, where Al Davis wanted to move the team to L.A. and they had a court case against the NFL, and that Al Davis always seemed to have a court case against Pete Rozelle in the NFL. But they did go back to Oakland in 88-ish, 87 or 88. Oakland's moved around more than anybody. My gosh, now they're in Vegas, obviously. So, but Brian was a leader on that team, and I wanted to talk to him about there's some great personalities on it, great players. Number one, Stanley Morgan, highly underrated wide receiver. Steve Grogan, a weathered veteran by the time that Brian Holloway showed up. Who else was on those teams? Irving Fryer, another mercurial talent. I interviewed Irving a couple of years ago on this show, and it was a very interesting conversation. Irving was very open about some of the things that has happened to him or he'd done in his life, and some were, some was he was at fault for, and other things just happen. Sometimes life just happens. Who else? Tony Collins, a great player in that team. Mosi Patupu, great special teams player and role player in that backfield. I know I'm missing somebody. A former SMU player. I can't think of his name right now. Isn't that terrible? Craig James. Another great. He had a short career, but gained 1,000 yards that year. So I want to talk to him about that locker room situation then and even after that. So if we do get Brian in here, which I have not had any response yet, unfortunately. And if this doesn't happen, we'll try to reschedule Brian. If you guys have some questions or want to go into something else, we certainly can in the time that we have. I'll continue to talk a little bit about those Patriot teams as I know them very well. If you got some other things you want to throw out there today, we'd be happy to do that. Dave Guyette, good morning. Big hello to you out in Amsterdam. And again, Kenny Gifford up on the mountain. Good to have you with us. Again, we're kind of waiting on our guest to see if we get at least a half an hour with him, maybe or so. We had confirmation yesterday that we were all set to go, but life happens. And if Brian doesn't make it, we'll certainly try to reschedule. We're talking a little bit about those Patriot teams that Brian played on. Again, it's how that team was able to focus. I had season tickets out there through that whole time. So the end of the Sullivan era, the Victor Kiam area, right through the hiring of Bill Parcells, basically. Then we stopped. Some great years under Ray Barry. Ray Barry, I mean, he was one. I'm trying to think of a coach to compare him to. I can't think of anybody because Ray Barry was the calmest guy you ever saw. You thought he was sleeping half the time, but he's a very smart football man. He'd been coaching for quite a while assistant coach on a few teams and with the Patriots for a while before he got this job when they fired Ron Meyer, who you maybe remember from the SMU Mustang days and them getting the death penalty, the Pony Express. Craig James, who I just mentioned, a great Patriot running back, especially in that 85 season. But then he runs afoul. Well, Ray Meyer left the NFL. I'm sorry, left SMU ahead of the posse. The death penalty hit SMU long after Ray Meyer was gone. But he had a couple decent teams. He took over for Ron Earhart, who had taken over for Chuck Fairbanks, which was another whole soap opera. When Chuck Fairbanks did great things in New England, people forget about it. He had some great teams. We're getting back now before the Brian Holloway era, but he had some great teams, but he left under such weird circumstances. He took a job. They had a great team. I think it was 78. They had a great team, and he announces, before the last game of the season, he's leaving to go to Colorado. And the team says, well, go now. Oh, God. And then they brought him back. He missed a game at which Earhart and I think Hank Bullock coached together. And he comes back and coaches in the playoffs, and they get beat in the first round because, with all that type of nonsense going on, how are you going to win? So Ron Earhart had gotten the job after that. He was 2-14, I think. If my memory served me right here, I think they were 2-14 the last year for Ron Earhart, and he gets fired and bring in Ron Meyer. And Meyer has a couple of decent seasons. In the strike season of 82, they go 5-4. I think they missed the playoffs, even though they had a largely expanded playoff then. He's 5-3 in 84 when he gets let go and Ray Berry comes in. I guess I went 8-8 in the second year as well. So listen, those Patriot teams, again, from 85, 86, 87, really, really good teams. Really, really good teams. Danny Fuller's with us from L.A. Good morning. It's early out there, obviously. Thanks. For always happy when Danny tunes in. I apologize that our guest, Brian Holloway, has not been able to make it into the studio, and I have not heard anything back from him, unfortunately. So hopefully everything's okay with Brian. And we'll, again, if we're not going to get him in here, it's 9:18. We still got a few minutes where we could get him in and do the interview, and that'll be fine. I'm just covering some of the time that Brian was with the Patriots. I want to talk to him about who the leader on that team was, right? Some of the issues with did the management issue, the ownership issue bother this team at all? Obviously, it didn't in 85. The quarterback issue with Tony Eason, the Super Bowl issue, what happened? I mean, they got steamrolled, but that was a steamroller of a team that they ran into. I don't know if anybody was going to beat them. Tony Eason was 0 for 6 that day, looked like a deer caught in the headlights. And by the way, Danny, Brian did go out and play in LA for a few years, or 1 year, I think. Let me look at that. I had it up here before. Let me pull it back up. I think with the first year he went to the Raiders, I think they were in LA. Yeah, 87. Whoops, hold on. How come I don't get what I want here? All right, I'm going to say they were the LA Raiders in 87. Let me click on this. Will this tell me? Yes, they were in 87. They were the LA Raiders. And back in they were still in 88. They're still the LA Raiders. So I apologize. I thought they'd gone back to Oakland as his second year, but they did not. So anyway, they spent time out and I'm curious. Answers my next question. Oh man. So were the Rams still there, Danny, by the way, in 88? Or they hadn't moved to St. Louis yet in 88, right? They were still there. So they shared the stadium, I'm assuming. What an awful place. I got to ask Danny this. If you went to Rams games or, well, I'm sure you didn't go to Raiders games. The first go round, and Danny had some great seats at the Dodger game the other night. Man, you make me jealous. A couple of those shots you've shown this year. Not for the Dodgers, obviously, but, just being in there in the first place. If you went to watch a game in the LA Coliseum, was it an enjoyable experience? Bob Hildeberg, great Patriot historian. Hey, I bring Bob in for a little bit chat today about those teams because it doesn't look like Brian's going to be able to make us, but we're going to reschedule with Brian. I don't know what happened. We had a great phone call a couple of weeks ago. We talked yesterday because I hadn't heard from him. And I thought we were good to go, but who knows? Life happens. So Bob wants to know, can you ask Brian about his Rolls-Royce car that he drove when he was playing with the Patriots? Absolutely. Let me make a note, Bob. By the way, during his playing days and after his playing days, or maybe it was even after, I'm not sure how long he was there, Brian lived in Stevenstown, New York for a long time, which is about an hour from where I am in Half Moon. His kids went to Berlin High School. There was an incident, I think in 2013, where he was away and a bunch of his son's friends, like 300 kids supposedly, came and trashed the house. It was a whole big drawn out legal issue for a long time. And I wanted to talk to Brian about that. And if it soured him, I know he lives in Florida now. I don't think he doesn't have that home anymore. And I want to see if that soured him on upstate New York, if you will. And his son did tragically die in 2016 in a car accident in Florida. Brian did a lot of motivational speaking after his career. I don't know if he's doing that now. It was one of the questions I would have asked him, obviously. And Bob, if you want to come in, I'll put a link up here. If you want to come in and talk about, I'd love to talk about those teams specifically. And Brian a little bit. If we can't get Brian in here, we'll get you in. And if he does pop in, I'll pop you out, if you will. I got a feeling once we get to 9:22, we're getting to the point where I doubt we're going to see him. If he pops in, we're going to have a very short interview, unfortunately. But if you're interested in that, Bob, I'll if you're still listening, I'll be happy to bring you in the room and talk about that a little bit. Danny was a Rams fan until George Allen left. Oh, so you stopped being a Rams fan. Bob wants to pop in. Give me 1 second there, Bob. LA Coliseum was the worst venue ever to watch a game. That's what I would assume for sure. I'm going to bring Bob in. So guys, you're going to see this link. Don't click on this link. This link's for Bob. You know what, Bob? I'm going to send it to you in Facebook if that's okay. Just so, because I'm not worried about my regulars here, but I worry about some yahoos come in and want to make comments about my head. If I can find you do have Messenger, don't you, Bob? Let's make sure you do. That's where I'm sending it. We'll bring Bob in here for a half an hour or so. It'll give us something to do. Still be able to keep on topic a little bit. All right, I sent you the link, Bob, in Messenger, so check that out. Bob's a great Patriot historian, great stuff too. Even if you're a fan of the National Football League, Bob does some great stuff, and I know he does some interviewing and podcasting of his own and has. And we can get in and talk about those Patriot teams that Brian joined. Thank you for confirming that, by the way, Danny, about that situation out there in the Coliseum. So to fill the void this morning, I'm going to bring in Mr. Bob. I'm not going to say your name right, Bob. Heidelberg. No. Highland. I got to say your name. Say your name, Bob. Jeez.
You say without the D.
Without the D. Heidelberg. Does that work?
Hildberg.
Well, that's easier. You just told me that. Man, I have trouble with Smith and Jones sometimes, Bob. Thanks, though, for coming in today. I'm glad you popped in because once in a while, because these things happen when you're doing shows live and guys can't make it. Stuff happens in life, and you try to fill the void for an hour. So I'm glad you popped in this morning, because if there's anybody that I can talk to the Patriots about in that specific time, it'd be you. So
Well, thanks.
you obviously do a lot of great stuff, post a lot of great stuff on social media. I know you do some, if it's not your own podcast, you get on other podcasts. So I appreciate your time this morning. Just so we stay in that era, I'd already talked about, and I really wanted to get in with Brian about, because I have great, and as I'm sure you do, fond memories of that time in the mid '80s when the team took off and under Ray Barry. And it's funny because they were really good, but there was all this controversy swirling around them at the same time with the ownership and
Sure.
Tony Eason. And what do you remember? Let's talk about Brian specifically. What do you remember about Brian? I thought Brian was a great player and a great leader on this team myself.
Oh, no question. Their offensive line, they had a great offensive line in the 70s, but when they brought in Craig James and Tony Collins, and then certainly it was the end of Grogan's. I mean, he played up until 1990, but he was more of a running quarterback in the 70s. But when they went down to Miami and beat Miami in that championship game,
great game.
They just beat the crap out of the Dolphins, mostly in a running game. I mean, Tony Eason didn't throw that much, so that was the big thing. And then you go to the Super Bowl against the Bears, and they weren't going to beat the Bears. I don't think they even had a positive running play in that game.
Not in the first half, I know they didn't, because I think they were minus 6 yards for the first half or something.
It was insane. But Brian Holloway was a motivational guy, was a big guy, a very intelligent guy. So he was the leader in the locker room, along with Pete Brock and Hannah and the other linemen that were there.
That's one of the things I certainly wanted to talk to Brian about. What was it like to play in the same line with maybe the greatest offensive lineman in league history, or one of them for sure, in John Hannah. Great player.
And he was so intense. I mean, you talk about Brady being very, very competitive. John Hannah was very competitive on every single play, even in practice. So, I mean, it was that intensity, and I think that elevated everyone's game. And Brian Holloway had a little bit of a reputation of playing when he needed to play, not all the time.
Yeah.
But when he had to step up, he stepped up, and I think he used a lot of that with his motivational speaking, is that, when you really get pushed against the pressure, then that's where you elevate your game, So there was a lot of guys back then that just kind of went through the motions and collected their paycheck. And, the one thing that I wanted to ask about the Rolls Royce thing is that I heard this from Patrick Sullivan. So Patrick Sullivan is the general manager of Patriots, and John Hannah gets hurt, and he's got to do rehab. So back in the 80s, they didn't have the facilities they had now. They had to go to another town. They had to work at the Y. They had a Nautilus at the high school. They were all over the place getting physical therapy. There wasn't one center. Right now, Gillette Stadium, there's a hospital right next door. They didn't have that back then.
Yeah, well, there was every year they were leaving for Bridgeport. They were leaving for Hartford. They were leaving for St. Louis. They were leaving for somewhere every year, it seemed. In the 80s.
It was a nightmare until really, that 85, 86 season. I mean, 81, they won 2 games. I mean, they had a tremendous team, but just fell apart. They didn't have the leadership. But the story goes that Brian Holloway brings his Rolls Royce and drives to Patrick Sullivan to turn in a ticket to get mileage for driving from his house to this rehab place. And Patrick Sullivan says, you're driving a Rolls Royce and you're turning in a ticket for 9 miles of traveling to Dedham for like $4.10 of expense miles. Get out of my office. I ain't giving you a dime.
That's some pretty funny stuff there. How close? I know you've been close to the team. I don't know. There's no real affiliation with the Patriots on your end, is there, or has there been?
Not real. I mean, I worked there for 13 years for the NFL, actually, from 2005 to 2018 in their stats department. So I was part of what they call the player participation unit. and there was 4 of us. We would take pictures, and then the pictures would put into a computer, and with those pictures, they could identify every player on every play. So I was up 150 feet up in the old Gillette Stadium. Now you got the big tower and the bell and all that stuff. But the old Gillette Stadium, I used to climb 150 stairs, move a plywood board, climb up on the roof, set up my tripod, and take pictures from that angle, which is pretty cool.
Talking about Gillette Stadium, I think we had season tickets there through the 80s, and I know you went to a lot of games in Foxborough Stadium, Sullivan Stadium, Schaefer Stadium, whatever it might have been called at the time.
Right, almost.
I have very fond memories there, and I miss the old metal bleachers and freezing and the bathrooms backing up. I miss all that stuff. I love Gillette Stadium. It's a beautiful stadium, right. But I'm very old school, and I have great memories of the old stadium. And you miss it at all? Is there anything to miss, or am I just nuts?
Yeah, you're nuts. But that's a fan.
I thought so. You think about it today, sitting in the seats today, and I think back to the days freezing my ass off on those metal bleachers, man, because a wind would blow through there when the wind came up. It was like, yeah,
it was all cement. And I mean, the thing about the other is that you parked in a parking lot that was full of mud, and you're in the woods. And even back then, the little hibachis, you'd like the little charcoal, you'd have a couple hot dogs. I mean, the tailgating is substantially different nowadays. Guys show up with their own, fire oven for cooking pizza. That's their trailer.
We saw so many like pickup games on like pavement or rocks or whatever. And we watched this one kid who had to be 15 years old, and he was drunker than a skunk. And he's diving for balls. By the time they got done, his face is all road rash, and he went into the game. All the porta potties that were disgusting, and
just in the trees.
We were at a game.
The thing about the hibachis is some people didn't want to leave them out, so they put them underneath their car.
Brilliant.
And then they come back and their car's on fire because of the atmosphere of the gas and all that kind of stuff. And I don't know how many Volkswagens that I saw that were on fire after the game.
It's funny.
But it was a $500 car back then.
That's true.
It wasn't a $12,000, $20,000 car nowadays. So you just buy another one for $500.
That whole area is so much different. I mean, before it was like, I used to explain, I grew up in a place where you had Route 30, it was called. You had one road up through the town. That was it. And it was all farm country and whatnot. And
sure.
there was a business here and a business there. Route 1 was kind of like that back in the day, right? It's like you're driving up out into nowhere, and all of a sudden there's a stadium. You got one road in and one road out.
Yep.
What a nightmare it was getting out of there some nights, for crying out loud. So
I mean, next to the Bay State, they used to race the trotters, the horses.
Right. Yeah.
And that's the reason that they built the stadium there, because they had parking for 30,000 cars.
Well, isn't that how Bob Kraft acquired the whole thing, by just buying up all the land around the stadium, basically, and leveraging his way into the stadium and then the team?
Exactly right. You can't sell it because, I get the parking.
Right.
It's brilliant. Yeah.
A brilliant business strategy. Going back to the old ownership, you mentioned Pat Sullivan. And does Pat Sullivan get a bad rap in the Sullivans losing the team with back? The story goes about him backing the whole Jackson tour and the money that was lost. And was that the reason that the Sullivans definitely had to get out? Or
that was Chuck Sullivan. That was Patrick's brother.
I thought, that's right, Chuck. Yeah. My bad.
Yeah. So Chuck Sullivan was a lawyer, and he's like, "Hey, we got this brilliant idea. Michael Jackson is just killing it." So Michael Jackson does that Pepsi commercial, and his hair catches on fire.
Yeah.
And that's what caused the demise of the ownership, because once his hair caught on fire, he said, "I'm not going on tour." But in the meantime, Chuck Sullivan had really mortgaged the Patriots and spent a couple $1 million already on promotions. So when they canceled the tour, he's like, "I owe a couple $1 million. For all these things that I set up, and I already paid them." And all of a sudden they got to sell the team because they didn't have the money to pay it.
If that didn't happen, would Billy Sullivan and the Sullivan family been able to compete in the changing economics of the game anyway, do you think?
Probably not. I mean, they never had any money.
Yeah.
And I mean, Kraft come in and bought it for whatever, $280 million, which was a lot of money back then. He overpaid, but he saw the future and put it all together.
It worked out all right, I'd say.
It worked out all right, but yeah, it was all the players loved. I mean, the guys that you watched in the 70s and 80s, not so much in the 90s until Bledsoe and Parcells show up, and then eventually Kraft. They were all great guys. You cheered for them, but I don't remember ever going to a game expecting them to win. You went to see the other team. I mean, I tell people all the time, I wanted to see Joe Namath and Roman Gabriel and Burt Jones and all the talent from all these other teams, and if we made the cover of Sports Illustrated with a Sam Cunningham or somebody like that, we're like, oh my God, we're on Sports Illustrated. That people know who we are.
Well, they teased us a few times, right, in the 70s where they had some really good teams. Obviously, the one I talked about Chuck Fairbanks a little while ago. I mean, he was a great coach and turned that franchise into a winner.
Right.
And they really got screwed out in Oakland in 76. 76, yeah. That was a great football team and probably the best team before we got to, I think, the Brady team, in my mind, was that 76 team. What are your thoughts on that statement, actually?
Yeah, so the 76 team was very, very talented, but I don't know how intelligent they were. So when I'm watching the game, I'm looking at who makes the least mistakes.
Yeah.
And in that game, there was 5 or 6 mental mistakes that the Patriots made, in addition to the bend, drive, roughing the passer.
Yeah.
I mean, Steve Grogan kind of talked himself out of it. He called the play, and then as he's going to the line, he tells Pete Brock to hike it on 2 instead of 1, and they go off sides.
Yeah.
And they lose 5 yards, and then Sam Cunningham runs a play and goes out of bounds about a foot short of the first down. So he just ran out of bounds. He thought he passed it. All he had to do was dive forward, and he would have got the first down. That would have changed. That was a third down play. So there was a couple little mental errors that like, oh yeah, we got this. And, you got to give it to Oakland. They came back and performed. I mean, that 3rd and 18 roughing the passer. And the other thing you don't hear is that, Ray Hamilton hit Ken Stabler in the head too,
Yeah, true.
So there's a little bit of, I don't know how controversial it is, but it was the breaks. And
I seem to remember Russ Francis getting beat up on a few plays, pass plays as well in that game. But again, I've always said, I still say on my other shows where I'm doing more opinion than anything else, is you don't let the referees beat you. Just don't let the referees beat you. You can't put yourself in that position, and so it's no excuse. I
mean, Russ Francis had his nose broken early in the game.
Yeah,
but he caught 2 touchdown passes, and then there was a play that. It's almost similar to the Gronk play against Carolina, where Gronk was bear hugged, and no call. And same thing with Russ Francis. 3rd down, he goes out and he gets bear hugged by Phil Villapiano. Can't even move his arms to catch the ball. The ball hits him in the chest, but he couldn't get his arms because he was getting bear hugged. No play, no foul, no big deal. Everyone wanted Oakland to win. The whole league, 15-1. They had lost to the Patriots early in the year, 48-17, and they wet the grass down. They let the grass grow in Oakland because we had too much speed for them. All those little things.
Interesting. Russ Francis was a great player too, and it's unfortunate his tragic passing here about a year ago. I think it was right upstate New York here.
Like us. Yeah.
Plane. Yeah, we're going up there next weekend actually for the weekend. So.
I was in the process. We were talking about writing a story of his life. And he says, I don't know if it was going to be fiction or nonfiction because some of the people that he hung out with were still alive and he didn't want to use their names. He had a colorful life.
That would have been interesting. You don't have enough information where we could write this book anyway?
Probably, but friends of mine were involved in his celebration. They had a celebration of his life in Waikiki Beach on April 6th.
Yeah.
So I was able to not be there, but he'd be there in spirit because his family sent some pictures to me. And I really get to know his cousins and his family and stuff through, more after his life than before his life, of all the stuff that I've done with Russ over the years.
It's funny. No matter, again, a lot of great players pass through this organization, and some really good teams, but there's always some kind of drama following them around. I mean, the whole Chuck Fairbanks thing in '78 was just like, what the heck is going on here? That was a good football team, but they kind of just threw in a towel after that whole Fairbanks says he's leaving, and then they fire him, and then they bring him back for the playoffs, and it's just, what are your memories of that time?
Well, what happened was, when Darryl Stingley got hurt in the exhibition game, Russ Francis was Darryl Stingley's roommate. And Russ says, hey, Darryl, you don't have a contract. Don't play in this game. You could get hurt. And Darryl says, I'm a football player. That's what I do. And Grogan throws it a little too high. He had a tendency of throwing high rather than low.
Yep.
Goes up, breaks his neck. Well, the Sullivan said, we only have to pay someone's insurance for a year. So even though he wasn't under contract, they worked it out, and they said, we'll pay your insurance for a year. Because he lived till age 55. So for another 30 years, he was still paralyzed. And the Patriots didn't really want to take care of him after a year. And the Rooney of Pittsburgh stepped up and said, you can't leave a paralyzed guy on your team stranded like that. So the NFL stepped in and said, we'll pay for his insurance for the rest of his life. And Chuck Fairbanks just said, I can't work for someone that doesn't take care of their employees, their people, their team. So he had that sour feeling about the Sullivans aren't going to get my back, not going to take care of my players. And eventually came to her, so I got to get out of here. And then he set the stage to go to Colorado.
That's interesting, because I don't think I've ever heard that connection put together before. So that's an interesting anecdote for sure. That game was in Oakland, if I remember, wasn't it?
Yes, 76, yeah.
And if I remember, one of the great stories about John Madden is one of the guys who went to the hospital and stayed with Darryl Stingley when a lot of other people had just gone back to wherever they had to go to.
Yeah, Madden went there often, very, very, very often, because he was there for a long time. And Madden would go sometimes once or twice a week and just hang out, and just be there for him. So Madden was a great guy. I absolutely admire him for that.
That's a classy move for sure. I always find ties to our area. So Darryl Stingley's son played arena football here in Albany for the original Firebirds. 30 years ago, probably 20 plus years ago. He was a really good player. And now his grandson is a great player with the Texans, right? I think cornerback.
Yeah.
Mistaken. Yeah. So a lot of connections there to Darryl. He was a really good player and underrated, I think, as well.
No question. And one of the things that Russ Francis, a lot of guys, I try to keep track of weird things, and I try to keep back how many one-handed catches have players made that are memorable. And Russ Francis said it was amazing that this guy, Darryl Stingley, would just do anything and was totally not afraid of going over the middle and making one-handed catches. And Russ said, well, I guess I got to stop making one-handed catches. And Russ became even a better athlete because of Darryl's motivation. And unfortunately, Darryl, breaks his neck going up for a pass that he should have just let it fly over his head.
All right. Good morning, Mark Mancini. Again, another LA guy up early this morning. Mark, we got to get you back on. I know you've been busy. We'll get you back on. Danny, thank you for the stars. Always fun to have those. Those are cool. Thank you. And as we continue on, because we still got a few minutes to chat if you have it, kind of getting back to the 80s team, Eason, Grogan, it seems like the Patriots always wanted a guy who wasn't playing. The Patriot fans wanted a guy who wasn't playing all the time, right?
Doug Flutie was around a little bit later, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, even I go back to Plunkett and Grogan. When Plunkett was playing, it was okay, and then Grogan comes in, we want Grogan, then Grogan's not playing well, and we want whoever's on the bench behind him.
Right.
And then Grogan's back on the bench, and we want him. The Eason Grogan thing, I thought Eason could have been a great quarterback. He was lacking something, though, and I don't know if it's just courage.
That was a lot of it, yeah.
I don't know if that's the right word, but I mean, because that Bears game is a perfect example of the fact that he just looked like a deer to headlights while he was in that game. Do you think he had the talent? I think he had the talent to be a really good quarterback in this league. And do you think there's more than that word that held him back?
Well, John Hanna said you got to put Tony Eason in a dress because he just would, he just And from what I heard from Tony, he says, I want to play golf when I'm later in life, So he played for the money. He played
There you go.
to if the guy's open, I'll get it to you. But if it come close, I'm turtling and I'll play for another play. So Grogan went through numerous operations and shoulders and necks, and everyone thought he was.
He looked like an offensive lineman by the end of his career with the neck brace, right?
So, this was back in the 80s. The chiropractors weren't a big deal. Everyone thought that they were kind of weird. So Steve Grogan actually designed something that was in his walkway down in his basement. He put these two poles, and then he put like his neck brace in between them. And he would just kind of put his thing there and just hang there. It was just something that he invented just to kind of stretch his body, So,
and during that Super Bowl year and the following year where they made the playoffs and lost a tough game in Denver, right. Grogan was coming in constantly to build his team out.
No question.
I think he was just a great player. And then later on, Flutie comes in and it becomes a whole freaking circus because at that time, Flutie was not an NFL quarterback. He was better when he came back from Canada, but at that time, he had no chance. But the fans wanted him, right? Because
he ran around and he made some plays,
Yeah.
His famous play where he did a reverse bootleg against the Colts with 12 seconds left, and they ended up winning the touchdown. And the radio announcer Dale Arnold, who was more known for his hockey announcers, but he was the radio guy for the Patriots during that time. He says the fans are going Iki Baluki for Doug Flutie running this touchdown. So he was a hero for winning a couple games in the clutch, but. The thing about him, he wasn't even 6 feet tall, so he had to kind of maneuver around and kind of figure out where these guys are.
Yeah,
and throw in between the linemen instead of over the linemen, like Grogan, who was 6'4", or Brady or any of these guys. So
it was an interesting time for sure, man. And then the struggles got worse after that. Well, it looks like Brian has made it here, so I'm going to bring Brian in. But I appreciate you coming in and helping me fill some time, Bob.
Always the best. All right.
Appreciate
We'll talk soon.
Bye-bye. Better late than never. I've got Mr. Brian Holloway. Good morning, Brian.
Hey, buddy. How are you?
Good. How are you?
That work.
I was. You still there?
Does it turn this way?
You look good. Just move the camera up.
There you go.
Yeah, you look good. There you go. Where are you? You look like you're in the. Oh, now I can see the archway there. Okay. How are you, buddy? I was worried about you.
No. I was sitting here, and then we get calls from grandchildren coming in and so forth. So
life happens. I know it's no big deal. If you got some time, we normally I'm done at 10, but we can go a little longer. And if you got some time, we'll chat until. Have you got a hard stop at some point here, Brian?
We've got a good solid 15, 20 minutes.
Okay, good. We'll go through some stuff real quick. So, Brian, Dandy Fuller says you look like you can still play. There you go. There's the best compliment you'll probably get all day, Brian. I appreciate you coming. I was big, as I told you when we chatted, I was a big Patriot fan, had season tickets all through the 80s and enjoyed watching you play. I was just talking with Bob Hilberg. I don't know if you know Bob. He's a great Patriot fan. Yeah. Sure. He came in to fill a little time with me, which we appreciate. I want to talk, since we got limited time, I'll go quickly through a couple of things. Early in your life, you ended up going
how you wanted to know New England is now New England Patriots and New England Buccaneers? That one?
The New England Buccaneers, yeah.
Great out here.
Maybe the Patriots will move there someday. Who knows? No, I don't think there's any thought of them moving anymore. You ended up at Stanford University, and I know that you ended up all over the country when you were a kid. What was the reason for all the traveling around, by the way? I don't know that.
My father was one of the elite military professionals in the Air Force. And so as a high-level commander during the Cold War as well. So he was entrusted with some very, very, very serious and very difficult missions. Yeah.
Cool. So again, you end up at Stanford, but you struggled early in your life academically, but you end up not just going to Stanford, but you're offered to go to pretty much every high academically rated school in the country. That must have been quite a transformation. What was it that changed for you that you were able to kind of go from those struggles?
I moved in and out of 10 different schools growing up. So you're coming into different curriculums. Two, it's completely different when you're in the military, because when your dad leaves, you don't know when he's going to come back or if he's going to come back. So it's a different sort of childhood. And coming up in the 60s, we know what kind of year 1968 was, right? So, that's we lost Kennedy in the 63, and then his brother in 68, and Dr. King. So it was very turbulent. And so living in that kind of space with a lot of change happening, it was very difficult. And so they put me in special ed. The teacher said, you haven't learned to read or write well, and you can't speak very well. You have an incurable stutter. And so we're going to stick you in special ed. And I says, I don't belong in special ed. And she said, Brian, some people are just born stupid. And I said, what if she's right?
Wow.
And I thought, what if she's not? And then I had a teacher pull me into, because I was you had to take Spanish or a language. That was terrible. It was too fast. I couldn't listen that fast. And then a teacher said, I want to teach you. And it was Latin. I said, there's no way I can learn this Latin. And he says, no, you don't read this book. I'm going to do orations. And he would do some of the classic Sophocles, Aeschylus, Euripides. And I was captivated by the stories. He said, tell me what you saw. And I started to describe stuff in tremendous detail. He said, I didn't mention any of that. He says, how did you know that? I said, I see pictures. It's like a movie. And he said, oh my gosh, you have an eidetic memory. You're gifted. And he says, now I want you to read that book. And I says, I don't really know how to read that book. He said, pick up that book and read it. And I read that book and 20 books that month, and 20 books a month for 20 years.
Danny's talking about how Bill Walton was formed the same thing before he was at UCLA, and the rest is history. So,
yeah, dear friend, very dear friend.
Bill Walton? Oh, cool.
Oh, yeah.
And Brian, Danny's a big UCLA fan, so he's gonna obviously badmouth Stanford just a little bit, I guess, before I cut him off. No, I wouldn't cut him off. So when you get to Stanford, you play for. I don't know if you didn't play your. You didn't play your whole career for Bill Walsh, but you played for Bill Walsh and became a great NFL coach afterwards, and also played with John Elway. What was your experience like at Stanford with those two guys and in general?
I think when I was being recruited by USC, and I was in the Rose Bowl in my seats, beautiful seats, brilliant and tactical genius. Bill Walsh planned to have his seats right where all the recruits were. So I was sitting next to Bill Walsh and Seifert, and they recruited me away from USC. And when I came up to Stanford, all of a sudden he says, I'm going to introduce something that no one has ever seen before. And he started introducing the West Coast offense, which was brilliant. Because in traditional thinking, you go, we're going to run the ball in this hole. We're going to take our great players and this great players. And Walsh asked a couple of questions. One, is it possible to get the ball down the field without blocking anybody? If it was possible, now the lineman can go down the field and really disrupt the defense. And that was very brilliant. And another one was, if a quarterback takes the ball and moves a certain way, how many natural holes will open up? So Lombardi we're going on one hole on one play. Bill Walsh discovered there are 25 holes on every play.
Interesting.
So it was brilliant. So it gave you a chance. You go into a game prepared. You go in prepared for a playbook with 5. You sit there and go in a game plan with Walsh. You got to prepare 500 plays. You go with any other coach, they only have 100 plays because you use one playbook in the first quarter, one playbook in the second quarter, one playbook. So it changes all the codes. Very effective, very brilliant, very interesting.
And John Elway, you only played with him a couple of years. You weren't there as he really became John Elway, I guess. Did you see great?
Oh, no. John Elway was John Elway on his first throw.
Yeah.
Okay, we saw him. He was, Walsh roomed him right next to me. Because that's what you do. You have your young quarterbacks always room next to the left tackle, the blind side, because that one is the one most responsible. And also, when you're a left tackle, you have a chance to call some plays too. and be able to say, okay, if you want to do this on this play, make sure you do it this way. Or if you're going to decide you're going to like to use that scramble pass, we're going to make it a play, but you got to call it so we know we can block for 6 seconds. And he had an arm. It's the only one I've ever seen. He could throw 100 yards, a bullet 100 yards. He had to learn how to throw an high arc ball where it was just timing, because he could pitch it down the field, and he's almost knocked out a few ball players.
Yeah, he had a rifle on him for sure. And I know he went to, as some leverage anyway. He came and played up here in New York at Elmira for the Yankees when he got drafted, because he didn't want to go to Baltimore. But he probably would have been a great baseball player too, I'm guessing.
No, not as good as not. He'd been a good one.
Yeah,
he wouldn't have been a Hall of Famer. When he threw his first ball at Stanford, and the coach says, we want to make sure you can throw the deep ball, and to get your arm ready, you have the quarterbacks come in and throw kickoffs. And he threw the ball out of the stadium, and everyone stopped, and he was like, I'm sorry. It got away from me. I'm sorry. And everyone's thought was, first round draft pick, first pick in the first round, Super Bowl, Hall of Fame. One throw.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Danny just say, since you mentioned USC, which he likes to refer to as University of Spoiled Children, he takes back his Stanford remark. So, Danny, it's already out there. You can't take it back. It's all done now. Brian, you get drafted by the Patriots in 81, I want to say, 81 draft.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts about, I know you'd been in the East before. I think you went to high school in Maryland for a while.
My dad was stationed at Hanscom Field.
Yeah. What were your thoughts about coming back East? Were you excited about joining the Patriots at that point in time, or any team would have been fine?
I had my eyes focused. Let's see, the Redskin wanted me really bad. And that was close to my hometown in Potomac, Maryland. And then Tom Landry. So he flew me in on his private plane, got me in the stadium. I was the only one there, opened the top of the stadium, and announced Brian Holloway from Stanford University, the Dallas Cowboys #1 draft pick. And I said, and then I heard a voice, how does it feel? And I looked next to me, and it was Tony Dorsett. He said, we need you, big dog. And then I heard another voice, you're a Dallas Cowboy. And it was Staubach. And I was like, what was happening? It blew my mind. So they had hope. I think they were the 20th pick in the first round. And I went the 18th or 19th to the Patriots. So Walsh almost drafted me the 7th pick. He had 2 people he wanted badly. And they brought me on the phone on draft day. And he said, Brian, we really like to draft you as our #1 pick. That's number 7. And he says, but we also got to think about defense. And it was Ronnie Lott. And Ronnie was on the other side. And Ronnie and I were buddies since high school. And the general manager asked Ronnie, I says, Ronnie, we're going to have a trouble signing you, we're going to pick Brian. Are we going to have a problem signing you? And Ronnie said, no. And my line went dead. Yeah. So,
Any regrets? I mean, you go to a New England team that's, again, had been downtrodden for a few years anyway.
Sure.
And you play for Ron Meyer your first couple of years. What are your thoughts as you get to New England and start to acclimate?
Well, what thoughts are, we took a team that was needed to be rebuilt.
2-14.
And it was rebuilt and took them to the first Super Bowl. Are you kidding me? Yeah. We totally changed the arc of that culture. And I brought some of that Bill Walsh into New England.
Your first coach was Ron Earhart, I think, right? Yeah. They went to 14. Ron Meyer comes in from SMU.
Yeah.
Gets the team headed in a better direction, but
yeah.
Ray Barry, Ron Meyer, was Ray Barry a big difference maker as he took over?
He was different in that he changed the practice style so we weren't on our feet as long, which was actually brilliant. And he was outstanding architect of moving the ball down the field for the pass. He had no idea, no experience, no understanding of offensive line training. And so what he did after the 5th game, because he was struggling, we got the ball down the field, but we weren't scoring. And he said, "What's wrong?" I says, "You don't give a chance to these big linemen to beat on the defense, to break them down. You have to do that." And so we had some heavyweights up front in the top five. And when he called the plays, Grogan and Stanley Morgan, Hannah, myself, Pete Brock, would change the play. If we saw something better, we changed the plays. So we called the plays the rest of the season, all the way till our final game, which is the Super Bowl.
We want to forget about that game, don't we? A little. I mean, I'm sure you're still excited that you made it to that day, but that day itself was
Okay, hold on a second. Let me get you there, bro.
Yeah,
Let me get you. I do. And after the game, we're walking out. Walter Payton was, walking out. He was crying. Now, he's my dear buddy. I've known him a long time at the Pro Bowl.
Yeah.
And I said, "Please tell me you aren't crying because you didn't get a chance to score a touchdown." He said, "I deserve a touchdown. I deserve everything else." I said, "Walter, you're the legend. You're Mount Rushmore. You are the NFL. Now you understand you're the dream of every child. So I'm going to punch you in the neck and you wake up, put on that $1 billion smile, and you go out there and greet your fans. You won the Super Bowl." And he said, Big Dog, thanks. Thanks. He said, "You've always helped me. Big Dog, thanks. Big Dog." And he said, "Why are you smiling?" I said, "Bro, other than those 3 hours, we both had the greatest years of our life."
Yeah.
And he was like, "Whoa." He goes, "That's right." He says, "Come on, let's go." I said, "Let me take this smile off my face. I got to take this off."
I will point out to all the fans, the Patriots were ahead 3-0 in that game at one point. So it wasn't a total dismantling.
Well, I mean, there were some things that were different. Ray Barry said he's going to call the plays, and we were like, uh-oh. And he said, we're going to go right into their strength. We're going to throw the ball 60 times during this game, which was a huge disaster. Tactically, it was completely wrong.
Yeah.
And I don't know where he got that idea, because in the algorithm of running the 46 defense, no one had cracked the code to it yet. It's a mathematical formula. And it's not just great athlete, it's a formula. And no one had cracked the code yet.
And Bob says 85 was a magical. There were some great games, some great comebacks that year. It was a great year. What was the dynamic in the locker room about the quarterback situation with Tony Eason and Steve Grogan?
Well, the offensive line settled that real quick. And that is, we're playing to win the game. We will call plays to win the game. It doesn't matter what quarterback is in there. And each had their preference on play sets. Tony liked to move around. He was sort of like, no one will remember this show, Bush Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. He could only shoot if he was moving. And so we said, okay. So we had a different set of plays, but it took a while to figure it out. And finally we told him, I said, you be about you. Way you like to move, way you like to play. That's what we did with Flutie. You had to be like, and then we'll adjust the way we block by how you think. And he says, I got to run, I got to move. I said, then we aren't doing drop back, bro. It was that simple. But there wasn't this alliance, because we also had a third quarterback, which no one really got to see too much of, and that was Stephen Starring. He was a receiver, but a brilliant quarterback. And we had plays where, holy smokes, and we should have called more of them. I would have called more because I'm, from West Coast, but not everybody understands that high-speed offense.
Would you say, I mean, as far as leaders on that team, would you say the offensive line men were kind of leaders of that team? Because rushing was...
No, it's not kind of. We were.
Yeah, okay.
We were. We led the team. We led the league in rushing.
Yeah. Okay.
We could go in a game and say, we're going to run the ball 70 times, and we'll have the ball 48 minutes during the game. The other team, the other offense, didn't even need to wash their uniforms because they were only on the field for 12 plays.
Yeah.
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 So we had that kind of talent.
That was a great yourself and in my mind, maybe the greatest offensive lineman in history.
By far.
Yeah.
By far.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think people undersell John Hannah when we have this conversation.
By far.
Yeah.
By far.
Go ahead.
Such tremendous speed, tremendous intensity, In fact, he was not allowed in practice in the day when you would hit the sled. He wasn't allowed to hit the sled because he broke so many of them. So the velocity of his, his hit was explosive. The best there was none better.
I do have to ask you, just mentioned the practice field, and Bob Hilberg mentioned to me earlier he wanted to know about a story with you and you're bringing your Rolls Royce and asking Patrick Sullivan for mileage for driving to rehab. Do you remember this story?
I don't. I have no idea that was where that was described. I know they were surprised when I picked that up. I bought it for 16 grand, and I was going to do the work on it. And I had a very gifted master mechanic that was there teaching me about car. It happened to be Rosa Parks' brother, as a matter of fact.
Oh yeah, interesting.
Who goes back in our family history for many years. So I bought it to work on it, and then I brought it down to camp a couple of times. And I can't imagine. Yeah, I probably could have done that. I probably could have asked this. I probably could have.
Well, Bob says Pat Sullivan brought it up to him and that he did not give you the money because he said, "You're driving a Rolls Royce. I'm not paying your mileage."
Yeah, I'm sure there's a bunch of funny stories about
If you were playing today, I might probably think that was the way it should be. But I know you guys weren't, you probably made decent money, but you weren't making 2024 money.
Yeah, I told Michael Orr, he asked me to help, do a little coaching with him. And also Harbaugh called me in because his dad was my coach at Stanford. So I knew John and Jim, and on occasions, each of them would call me in. And I told Michael, I says, yeah, I'll be happy to help you. And he goes, well, you don't understand. My name was blasted all over the place, man. You don't know what it's like. No one does. I said, you have a brand that went around the world. That's a gift. And you'll be able to monetize that forever. He says, well, everyone treats me, but they're haters. I said, of course, because you got it. You're big. But he said, no one understands. I said, did you see the movie, Remember the Titans? And he said, oh, yes. Remember when they were talking about getting ready for the biggest guy on the other side? Yeah. I said, that was me. My name got blasted all over the world, too. Coach Boone was Virginia state champs. We were Maryland state champs. And after the season, we were undefeated. We go to this master scrimmage. So we became good friends. And I said, he says, well, I need you to help me. I said, you don't have enough money to pay me. He said, yes, I do. He says, how much is it going to cost? I said, well, I was going to ask you for a game check, but your game check, one game was more than I made my entire career. And I said, it'll cost you more than that. He said, what? I said, it'd cost you a game of spades. And he started laughing. And then that kicked off an enduring friendship for years.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Cool story. After Patriots career, you go on to the Raiders, who were in Los Angeles at the time. I mean, were you ready to move on from the Patriots at that point, or would you prefer to have stayed? What was your time like?
I knew the Patriots were in a difficult time because of the financial situation, right? So what you're going to do is you're going to dump some of your big accounts, which I had, the one who was getting paid well. And so going out in LA, I already had a scholarship at Harvard Business School. And they said, you only have to go 1 year. We'll give you a year credit because of the work I was doing with the NFL Players Association in the collective bargaining agreement. So when I went out to LA, it was okay. You're used to dramatic shifts, and that's part of the National Football League. So I already had my place in Harvard Square. I already had a wonderful group of friends there, and the Kennedy family rekindled some of the history of our family. Was very close to the Kennedy family back over 100 years. So it was a very fun, exciting, and then going to LA, it was like sort of going back home, because I've had so many wonderful experiences in Southern California as well, because we lived there too in the 70s.
And the last year you were there, you were hurt. I believe you were hurt most of the year. But was it injuries? Were you done? Could your career have gone on if you really wanted to, or had you pretty much played yourself out?
I could have played longer. I mean, when I went to, I told the Sullivans, I said, when they drafted me, I said, you do not need to draft another tackle ever, because I'm not coming out. I will not come off that field. And so I went 7,000 consecutive snaps without missing them. When I was traded, I had a torn ACL, a broken ankle, a broken foot, I mean, all sorts of, but I'd never gone to an extensive medical exam. I just played that hard. And so when I got out to LA, I went through my medicals, and they said, you have a torn ACL, you have a dislocated shoulder, you have a broken ankle, or a broken foot. And I said, yeah, I know. Now I know. I knew something was wrong. And by that time, it was like, I knew that I was completing that part of my career. And it was time for me to launch on to yet bigger and more incredible things as well.
Yeah, after your career, I know you did, I couldn't figure this out. I know you did a lot of motivational speaking after your career. Is that something you're still doing now, Brian? And tell us a little bit about that part of your.
Well, my goal was to be a senior consultant at some of the big consulting firms. But remember, that was back in the 70s, and brown skin doesn't really do that yet. Mm-hmm. Not yet. And so what it allowed me to do is to go in, and I go in and speak and inspire. But in the conversation, it was also a pitch, because they learned stuff about how we did things on championship teams, build an unstoppable team, how to make the impossible happen. What's the key to have a blitz pickup package? How do you have a reconciliation strategy? How do you build their team so close that you're always dealing in a place called 1 + 1 = 7? So that you get exponential growth and change, where you can do big stuff fast, easy, often, and you can scale. It'll be sustainable and declining marginal costs. So that brought me into a whole different galactic atmosphere in that world. So 16 million miles I traveled, and hired by 457 Fortune 500 companies, and rated the #1 most inspirational speaker and team builder in the country. So little did I know.
Are you still involved with that today?
I do. I still get calls. I got 3 calls already since we've been on here, and I'll still do so. I don't do as much. Back in the day, a slow month would be 10 events a month. Mm-hmm. A crazy week will be 15 events in a week, which means breakfast in Tampa, lunch in Atlanta, dinner in Arizona. Wow. So I won't work like that anymore. It was exciting. It was dynamic. It built a tremendous scalable, but it's time to wind down and be grandpa to, you have 8 children, you have 12 grandchildren. That keeps you busy.
Yeah, I'm sure it does. We only have 1, and that keeps us busy. Jeez, can't keep up with her, for crying out loud. She was just here yesterday because she had to go leave her daycare sick. So, good God.
Yeah, sure.
Tires me out about an hour, for crying out loud. In your motivational speaking, and obviously in your career, a lot of this stuff plays into it. In your personal life, you've had some crazy stuff happen. The whole thing in Stevenstown with the crazy party, which is only like an hour from me here in near Saratoga. And tragically, your son passed away in 2016. Did these things play into your speaking today, or after those events?
Well, it's and I say this because I was trusted with a gift. I'm not saying this to brag. I'm not saying this to be big-headed. But I was trusted with a gift. I did not know that my story and brand would go around the world. And so I'm known everywhere. And I'm trusted to serve. I'm trusted to lead. I'm a son of a military officer. I stand for the national anthem, and I kneel at the cross. And so my life is no different than any other people's lives who have, they face adversity, they face difficulty. And every morning they get up and look and see the face of God. So I'm one of those people. And every day, like today, both you and I were given the privilege of another day.
Absolutely.
And I take on that day as a gift. My son is with me every day. And I go out and continue to make contributions to serve and to lead.
Well, that's admirable for sure. I got a couple comments I want to kind of catch up on here a little bit for you before I let you go, and I just want to throw a couple names at you. So, where'd that go? I just had one in front of me here. Rick wanted to know who were your craziest teammates?
Okay, well, I think John Hanna was the craziest because you've never seen someone that big, that strong, that fast, so intense. That was profound, absolutely profound. And then Jim Ringo, the coach, that was profound. You have a genius from Vince Lombardi, so that was a shocker.
Yeah.
But in terms of some crazy stuff, all the running backs and wide receivers were always, they breathe by talking. And so all you hear the entire time getting ready to the game is they never stop talking. They never, and it's about anything and everything. And when I learned that that's how they breathe, it gave me an understanding of the world that they live in, which is much different than the world I make their world happen. But I have no interest in carrying the football. So Stephen Starring was amazing. Irving Fryer was amazing. Stanley Morgan was amazing. Just have incredible ball players.
I interviewed Irving Fryer, and I think I only got to ask about 6 questions in an hour because he'd just go.
Yeah, at the Patriots, Alzado was something else. Tuzak was something else. But that was sort of the culture of the Raiders. It was a whole different experience for me.
How about Bo Jackson? What was it like playing with Bo Jackson?
Well, when Bo Jackson came in, they wanted him to come in earlier. He said, no, I'm hunting. It's hunting turkey season. I'm not coming. And then when he got there in practice, the coach yelled at him, we gave you the playbook. You're lining up in the wrong place. And Bo said, who are you? I don't even know your name. I'm Bo Jackson. Can they block? Can they block? He looked at us. Can you block? I said, yeah, we can block. Good, because I score touchdowns. That's what we do. Okay, that's what I do. Okay, let's run the next play. The coach just shut up. So he was great to have in the huddle because we'd go up and we were playing the Seattle Seahawks on Monday night. And he sees something. I said, play with what you like, bro. Play what you like. And they called a play, and he looked at me. He said, dog, big dog. I said, what's up? He says, let your guy go. I said, what you got on your mind? I said, I need you to get Kenny Easley down the field. Can you get him? I said, yeah, I can get him. I said, you get him, we're going to score. I said, you got this. I said, whoa. I said, you going to pay my fine? He goes, I'll pay your fine, $15,000. And he goes, don't worry, you won't be fine. We're going to score. And so I put a move on my defensive. Jeff Bryant was his name, as a matter of fact. I gave him a little crisscross. He was off balance. And then I squirted down the field. And it looked really funny on the video because everybody was running to the right. And here I am running off to the left downfield at full speed until you see Bo Jackson come. And I was able to get just a tip on Kenny Easley. And he scored on that play.
That was a Monday Night Football game, wasn't it, if I remember
My
right?
last Monday Night Football game, yes.
Cool.
Yeah.
Danny's asking, and I think this is probably clear, John Elway, why didn't he play for his father at San Jose State? Jack Elway came to coach Stanford after, I don't know if it was right after Bill Walsh, but it was.
Well, John Walsh, you can't turn down Walsh.
Yeah.
We get a chance to throw the ball 60, 70 times a game.
Yeah.
Yeah. And his whole offense flexed around the quarterback. So if you love to drop back, that's the kind of place. If you love to move around and run and shoot, that's the kind of place you're going to run. And that was very exciting for John. That was very exciting. because
Yeah.
he liked that play. He didn't want to sit and just drop straight back. He wanted to move around, and he would have some plays where he just run backwards for 30 yards, and because he had great speed, and then he just run a little arc, and then he whiffs the ball down the field 75 yards. You can literally hear the ball rip the air as it passes through the air.
Well, Pac-12 versus for Pac-10, I guess maybe it was then. I'm not sure. I lose track of
It's Pac-10, yeah.
Pac-10 then, right?
Yeah.
Versus whatever league San Jose State was in at that point in time is, no comparison either. So,
Yeah.
Danny talking about the Bears, that was definitely one of the best teams.
Well, I'd have to say they were the greatest team of all time in this manner too, because of the media and the caricatures and that came out of that. They realized for the first time that advertising in the NFL, they would sell part of their team the way you sell media and stuff to just one network and one corporation. And then when they realized they could thin slice and go the quarterback with that company and McDonald's with Fridge and because they were able to thin slice, the valuation of every NFL team soared. And that season changed the entire way the league was monetized. And everyone benefited tremendously by what we learned, by what they did. Yeah. Very good.
And Bob says Ronnie Lepet, Roland James, and Rick Sanford, all great players with the Patriots. All say hi.
The champ, the best ever, the superstars. I'm going to be up there at Brady's induction to the Hall of Fame coming up at the end of next month. So I'll be up.
Well, that'll be fun. That'll be fun.
Yeah.
Danny wants to know if the LA Coliseum wasn't the worst stadium to play in. What was, in your opinion? It looked awful. Danny confirmed it. Not great place to watch.
LA Coliseum was unbelievable to play in because it was grass. If I could have played on grass, and Gene Upshaw said this to my face, he said, if you would have played on grass, your career would have lasted 8 years longer. And you know that back then, and the tremendous cost on playing on turf. So it was beautiful because it was turf. It was beautiful because it was California. One of the most interesting places to play was the Astrodome, because they had loose boards underneath. And when Earl Campbell would come around, he knew where the boards were. And he knew if he ran a certain way and hit at this point on the field, it created an acceleration, a bounce.
Wow.
And they had specific plays to use. He was very bright. He knew how to use that field. So every field had its interesting benefits and also tremendous challenges.
What was the worst one for you to play in?
Philadelphia was hard. The Giants Stadium was hard. And my gosh, our stadium was tough. It was just so hard. It was concrete underneath.
Yeah.
And it wasn't yet the time of the change. And that would tremendous amount of trauma to your hips and knees and shoulders and neck and back. But that's just what was, they were in the middle of that change. And the Sullivans, as much as they tried and much as they worked, they ran into some very serious financial troubles, and it was to their demise.
Rick wants to know if your gym teacher lived long enough to see your success.
As a matter of fact, yes, the gym teacher was at Hanscom Field, and I was invited back, and the gym teacher was there, and he handed me the what was it called? The certificate, the presidential certificate of athletics or something. And that was signed by Richard Nixon.
Wow.
So I went back and I received that tremendous acknowledgement. And so that was quite something else. Other places I went back, they go, how did you do that? That's impossible. So
Bob wants to know what you got to remember. I'm sure you caught a deflected pass thrown by Steve Grogan for a 5-yard gain on a 34-7 route of the Dolphins. I'm sure. Is that your only pass reception in the NFL?
Yeah, I don't want to touch that thing. I don't like that brown ball. I don't want anything to do with it. And it was tipped, and I caught it, and I just started running, and I just ran straight because that's all I knew, and not to fumble. And I ran downfield, and the first person that was down there, I just ran straight at him because that's what I was used to doing, was to knocking people over. And then by the time I hit him, I realized, wait a minute, this is the one time I could actually run away from him. And I think I was 1 yard short of the first down, and all the running backs were cheering me on, going, Holloway, big dog, why didn't you run to the sideline? You would have gotten the first down. I said, shut up. I don't like touching this thing. But they cheered me on. I was a big hero that day.
Bob, who's the key of this information? It's shocking that you and Joe Andrews are the only two linemen ever to catch a deflected pass. That's interesting in all these years.
Well, I certainly didn't know that. Boy, he has a lot of information.
He does. Bob's always contributing lots of Patriot trivia. And he says, God bless you, Brian Holloway. And I'll say the same thing real quick because I missed this question. Did you ever have any interest in getting into coaching?
No. And here's why. I saw the NFL as a springboard into do something bigger and more. I was building that while I was playing. And so I was headed corporate. I was heading out to the Fortune 500. That was sort of my target market. And I wanted to do big and interesting things. So I come from a long history. We're 5th generation advisor to the White House.
Right.
I grew up in the White House, and my grandfather was sitting there and was one of the architects of the Civil Rights Movement. When I was a young boy, sitting at Grandpa's dinner table was Dr. Martin Luther King. So my sister went to Stanford. My brother went to Stanford. Each of them had tremendous scholastic careers, and now are great corporate leaders across the world.
You know, at risk of, I'm going to dive off topic for a second. I'm going to let you go soon. I know I've already selfishly taken you longer than you said you'd go. I appreciate it more than you know. You just brought up your grandfather. What did your grandfather think about the progress that we've made? Or
he was pleased in some areas, and he was very distressed in others.
Mm.
He said there's more that could be done, particularly because he was the architect of the United Negro College Fund. So he recognized that wasn't just for African Americans, it was for Native Americans as well, which was a big part of our heritage. I'm part Cherokee and Iroquois, but also I'm part Viking and Roman. And he said people of all color, and then particularly women. The United Negro College Fund was deep commitment into having opportunities for women. And it's not where he wanted it to be. And we're still working on that.
Well, everything's a work in progress, right? So, Brian, I echo Danny's thoughts here. Great interview this morning. I loved it. Appreciate you making our Friday, and I'll echo Bob's. God bless you, Brian Douglas. Thanks for coming in. Brian Douglas. Who's Brian Douglas?
That's my middle name. That's my middle name.
It's your middle name.
Yeah. So
Brian Holloway.
Yeah, we'll do this again, buddy. We'll do it again.
I had a blast. So thank you, Brian, for coming in.
All right. Good to see you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
My thanks to Brian for coming in. A little bit late, whatever. We took him longer than he said he could make it, and I appreciate that. Selfishly, I took a little more time. I appreciate you guys who hung in with us while we waited for Brian, and it was well worth the wait in my mind. I had a great time. I didn't get to everything that I want to chat with him about, but we'll get him in again, and we'll chat some more about a lot of topics. That's the thing. It's always not just football. It's everything. So, guys, I appreciate you coming in and hanging with me today. Keith Engle. I thank my guest, Brian Holloway. Thank you guys for hanging in, and you guys have a great Friday. I'll see you Sunday with the Stream of Consciousness. Next Friday, Billy Martin Jr. We'll have you then. Bye-bye.